respected.
Hello and welcome. I'm Kriti Mehta and you're watching World Report on NewsX World. Let's take a quick check of the headlines this hour. Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney once again reiterated, saying Ottawa will resume trade talks with President Donald Trump when appropriate, after Trump suspended negotiations last month over an anti-tariff ad from Ontario's government. Carney, speaking at the G20 in Johannesburg, said he remains open to discussions while the U.S. Chinese Premier Li Qiang has told Italian President Giorgia Meloni at the G20 summit in South Africa that China welcomes more Italian companies into its markets and expects Italy to ensure a fair, non-discriminatory environment for Chinese investment, as both sides signaled a push to strengthen bilateral cooperation. China's Foreign Minister Wang Yi said it was shocking and accused Japan of crossing a red line and sending a dangerous sign when asked about earlier comments by Japanese Prime Minister Sanae Takichi. The diplomatic crisis has been rising over 2 weeks now and has spilled into trade relations, with China escalating the dispute to UN chief. Guinea-Bissau's 60,000 voters cast ballots for 12 presidential candidates in a high-stakes election marked by the controversial execution of the PJ party. The vote comes amid decades of turmoil, including 4 coups and widespread poverty. Myanmar's junta says it has arrested 1,590 foreign nationals in just 5 days during major raids on the Shui Koko scam hub, seizing 2,893 computers, 21,750 phones, and over 100 Starlink receivers. The crackdown comes as internet scam networks continue to thrive in Myanmar's borderlands amid civil war. Russia's defense ministry reports that air defense systems intercepted and destroyed 75 Ukrainian drones over the past night. Drones were sighted over the Black Sea, Crimea, Bryansk, Belgorod, and other regions. US President Donald Trump says that his Ukraine peace plan is not final. This comes as US Secretary of State Marco Rubio has left for Geneva to hold discussions on the Ukraine peace plan. According to Vietnam's Ministry of Environment, floods in Vietnam have claimed 90 lives, with 12 people still missing. Torrential rain and landslides have battered south-central provinces since late October. Viewers, Ukraine has launched a significant drone strike on a major heat and power station in the Moscow region. According to Governor Andrei Vorovok, multiple drones hit the Shatura power station, about 120 kilometers east of Kremlin. Unverified telegram videos showed loud explosions followed by balls of fire rising into the night sky. Russian officials say several drones were intercepted by air defense systems, but others crashed directly onto the facility, igniting a huge fire. 3 transformers, each the size of a small apartment, caught fire and were badly damaged. Authorities say the blaze is now under control. With temperatures near freezing, backup power has been activated and mobile heating units deployed. However, at least one local resident reported having no heating. The incident comes as Russia continues targeting Ukraine's own energy infrastructure, and tonight's strike marks an escalation in the energy war between the two countries. Mohammed Osman, who is an international relations expert, is joining us live from Cairo. I welcome you, Mr. Osman, for joining us here on NewsX World. And now this is continuing between Russia and Ukraine, and even as Russia claims that it has intercepted 71 drone strikes and missiles, there still has been significant damage to its Shatura power plant there. How do you see this proceeding from here on?
Thank you for having me, Kriti. Greetings to you and to your audience. It seems that the energy war, as you said, between Russia and Ukraine is escalating. Russia has been gradually degrading the Ukrainian energy infrastructure over the past few weeks using missile strikes and drone strikes on the energy infrastructure, on power stations, on gas refineries. And Ukraine is trying to do the same with Russia, with the purpose of hampering Russia's oil production and hampering its ability to export oil, which is the main driver of its of income in its economy, and also to try to make winter as hard as it can be on the Russians. But of course, there is no comparison. The damage Ukraine is doing to Russia's energy infrastructure is minimal in comparison to the massive damage that has been inflicted by the Russian military on the energy infrastructure of Ukraine. So Ukraine is acting out of desperation at this point. And when we look at the situation in the field, Russia basically all but capturing Pokrovsk at this moment in the Donbass, capturing Kupiansk and Kharkiv, Leningrad is under siege. The Russians are advancing in cities like Seversk and Liman and Konstantinivka, and even Mariupol in Zaporozhye. So it seems that the Ukrainian army is gradually collapsing on the Donbass and Zaporozhye front lines, which is a very huge red flag at this point. And this maybe prompted the United States to push forward its peace plan at the moment to save whatever can be saved at this point, because Ukraine is in a very dire situation, and the Europeans they can talk the talk, but they cannot walk the walk. They have pledged so much support for Ukraine, yet they in 2025, European and American financial and military support to Ukraine decreased by about 46%. So it doesn't seem that actions on the ground reflect what their pledges, the pledges they have reiterated.
So how much more fire do you think the Ukrainian military and army has left in it before it finally agrees to a peace plan or negotiations that are being fostered by United States?
It all depends on the European and the American ability to deliver more aid to the Ukrainian military, which seems to be backing down. Of course, I'm not a military expert, but I've seen reports saying that this situation, if the war goes on under the current circumstances for less than a year, then the Ukrainian army would actually collapse. And President Trump himself said that if the Ukrainians do not accept the current deal, they will have to accept an even worse deal somewhere down the line. So, and I think that this makes perfect sense what the Americans are saying. They are being completely realistic about the situation on the ground. All of these ideas and fallacies about inflicting a strategic defeat on Russia have all but evaporated. Everyone, even in those European capitals, know right now that the idea of defeating and humbling Russia is something that is completely unattainable and unrealistic, and that the solution to the Ukraine crisis, the interests of Russia have to be taken into account, including the root causes of the war.
All right. Requested to now stay on with us, Osman. We have some more information to give our viewers. This one from the G20 summit. Now, at a press conference during the G20 in Johannesburg, French President Emmanuel Macron stood by his chief of staff, asserting that he still had his full confidence despite the controversy surrounding his remarks earlier this week. The comments, which sparked criticism, were, according to Macron, taken out of context. The remarks had drawn accusations of warmongering, particularly after the French general warned that France must be prepared to lose its children in the face of the ongoing war in Ukraine. First, listen to that statement, and then I'll bring back my guest into the discussion.
Je ne fais pas de commentaire. Il n'y a qu'un chef des armées en France, c'est le président de la République. Il y a ensuite un lien et un commandement qui se fait avec le chef d'état-major des armées, qui a toute ma confiance. et qui a tenu un discours qui était beaucoup plus élaboré que la phrase qu'on en a sortie. Je vois assez bien de quoi il peut s'agir, sortir une phrase et la sortir de son contexte pour faire peur. Je vois aussi les surréactions qu'il y a pu avoir. La ministre des Armées, comme le chef d'état-major des armées lui-même, ont pu, je crois, ces derniers jours donner toute clarté. Et pour tous les gens qui veulent sincèrement écouter ce qu'ils ont dit, remettre les choses dans leur contexte.
And Macron also addressed the US-backed ceasefire proposal, calling it a positive initiative for peace. However, he emphasized that the primary concerns were Ukrainian sovereignty and European security. While the US had made strides in pushing for a ceasefire, Macron insisted that both Ukraine and Europe must be central to any negotiations. This is what the French president has stated. Let's go back to Osman, who continues to stay with us.
I think it's very good that the US proposed something to go to a ceasefire and peace, and we have to commend these efforts. But at the same time, as what is at stake is obviously Ukrainian sovereignty and European security. It's normal to have both the Ukrainians and the Europeans on the table to finalize this plan. So this is exactly what we will do tomorrow and the days after in order to make a common plan. Now, we just have one problem, and our problem is not the US on this negotiation on this point. Our unique problem, all of us, is Russia, which started this war. We refused to take the ceasefire proposals in February, March, July, August, etc., and didn't provide any guidance if they are okay just to have a ceasefire now.
All right, after that statement from Macron, Osman, I want to take your reactions as to the stance that France is taking on the war and the US peace plan.
Well, Europe in general, and of course France is no exception, they are really upset about being sidelined and ignored. The Europeans have become a marginal actor in the international sphere. They are no longer a great power anymore. They are very upset that the Americans and the Russians and even the Chinese are talking about this and are attempting to find a solution or even dividing the influence among one another in the world. And the Europeans are being left out of the conversation. They are not on the big boys table anymore. And of course, this enrages the Europeans. And in order to deliver the message that they are an active and preeminent global power, they make statements like what the French military chief of staff said. Basically, France and many other European countries, they are undertaking what we can call a campaign of fear-mongering among the population to mobilize them and convince them that they have to endure harsh economic conditions or even harsher economic conditions to support Ukraine militarily and economically and help it persevere against the Russian invasion. And of course, for the European populace to buy into this narrative, they have to be convinced that there's an impeding Russian threat, that Russia might actually attack NATO and Central and Western Europe, which is ludicrous, as you very well know, Kriti. Russia does not even have the capacity to occupy all of Ukraine. So basically, these are very, very severe exaggerations of the Russian threat and even of Russian capabilities. And Russia itself is not interested in starting a third world war, because fighting NATO means basically a decision of collective suicide, because it will be mutually nuclear annihilation. So no one will willingly pursue such a course of action. Yet the Europeans are trying. Maybe the French chief of staff went too far in his statements, and Macron is trying to do damage containment. However, the real problem with the Europeans is that they were not consulted in the 28-point plan proposed by President Trump. The plan, the Russians were consulted, even the Ukrainians were consulted, yet the Europeans were left out. And now they seek to make their own amendments to this plan so that it, moving forward, so that it can accommodate their interests more. But I do not see Russia or even the United States being very accommodating of any European requests.
All right. Well, thank you for sharing that opinion of yours with us here on News X World. But I request you to stay on with us. We have some news now from Israel and Gaza, where Hamas has once again called on ceasefire mediators, including the United States, to take urgent action as Israeli forces continue their deadly attacks in Gaza despite the ongoing truce. In a statement, Hamas condemned Israel for reportedly breaching the ceasefire terms, citing the violations of the Yellow Line and ongoing airstrikes in eastern Gaza. These actions, they argue, have led to more mass displacement and hundreds of Palestinian deaths. Meanwhile, according to the Gaza government media office, there have been over 400 documented breaches since the ceasefire began on October 10, with more than 342 civilians killed in these attacks, including many women, children, and the elderly. Hamas has reportedly rejected any new conditions proposed by the Israeli government and urged mediators, especially the US, to press Israel to fulfill its commitments. Now, in the latest wave of attacks on Saturday, at least 24 Palestinians were killed, including children. Israel's military claims that strikes were in response to a Hamas fighters' attack on Israeli soldiers. All right, let's bring back Mohammed Osman, joining us live from Cairo, into the discussion here. Hamas has urged for the mediators to act. What can Hamas really expect without it disarming its militants? Is Israel and the IDF going to stop their operations?
So, as usual, whenever there's a ceasefire involving Israel, it is usually a one-sided ceasefire. The other party sticks and obligates itself to upholding the provisions of the ceasefire agreement, while Israel, of course, is way more liberal with its compliance with the ceasefire, basically carrying out heinous violations of the agreement. And we have seen that in Gaza. The ceasefire has been in effect for about 40 days now, 41, 42 days, if I'm not mistaken. And during those 40 days, almost 350 Palestinians, mostly civilians, were killed by Israeli strikes and Israeli incursions into the areas beyond the Yellow Line, which are still under Hamas control, which is basically about 45% or 43% of what remains of Gaza. And the remaining 56% is occupied by the Israeli military. The Israeli military also occupation military is expanding the so-called Yellow Line and moving it deeper into Gaza, basically acquiring more land. Of course, this comes in complete violation of the ceasefire agreement, which actually stipulates that Israel has to propose a schedule or a timetable for its gradual withdrawal to a buffer zone on the borders of Gaza. But it seems that they are making plans to make their occupation of over half of the Gaza Strip permanent. Hamas, on the other hand, for all of its flaws, has complied with the ceasefire. It has released all the hostages and the detainees. It has turned over most of the bodies. Only 3 bodies of detainees are left in the Gaza Strip, while Israel has not complied with most of the provisions of the ceasefire agreement. So that's why Hamas basically is demanding that the mediators, especially the United States, which is the only party that is capable of applying pressure on Israel, to take action in order to prevent the collapse of the ceasefire. And this has been reiterated also by other mediators behind closed doors, that Turkey, Egypt, and Qatar have also urged the United States through back channels that it has to do something about these incessant Israeli violations, because basically they will be to the detriment of peace, the ceasefire in Gaza. And the idea of disarmament of Hamas, as you mentioned, Kriti, of course, this is part of the Trump plan, and it is part also of the Security Council resolution. However, there are other provisions of the Trump plan that have to be applied first before the course of action for the disarmament of Hamas can take hold, and it will be a time-consuming affair. It's a process that will take time and will need Palestinian dialogue.
All right. Well, thank you for sharing that with us, Mohammed Osman, there joining us live from Cairo. And with that, viewers, we shift our focus to the Japan-China spat Now, China's Foreign Minister Wang Yi has expressed concern over Japan's actions regarding Taiwan, calling them a wrong signal and accusing Japan of crossing a red line. The recent diplomatic dispute started after Japanese Prime Minister Sanae Takaichi stated that Japan could call for a military response if China ever attacked Taiwan. Now, China considers Taiwan its territory and has accused Japan of intervening in the issue. In a related development, Japan's foreign ministry has also rejected China's letter to the United Nations, calling the claims unacceptable and reaffirming Japan's commitment to peace. China's letter to the United Nations defended its stance on Taiwan and warned that Japan's actions could lead to more serious consequences. Meanwhile, Taiwan has also responded to the letter, condemning China's move as both ill-disposed and unreasonable, while also claiming that it distorts historical facts and violates international law. Amid ongoing diplomatic tension, it is important to note that China remains Japan's largest export market after the United States, with Japan exporting over $125 billion worth of goods, including industrial equipment, semiconductors, and automobiles. And I want to welcome Srabani Roy Chaudhary, who is a professor at the Japanese Studies Center for East Asian Studies at the School of International Studies in the JNU. She's joining us live from New Delhi. I extend you a very welcome and thank you for joining us here.
Thank you so much for having me.
Right. How do you see this pact progressing, and how much muscle does Japan really have in its fight against China on the Taiwan issue, especially given the the amount of exports that it has to China? It's really dependent on Chinese exports.
Let me just go back to what was the reason behind it. It talks about survival threatening situation. That is what Takaichi-san of Japan's Prime Minister had made a statement within the parliament. It was a discussion with respect to national security concerns, and it was a hypothetical situation which on which she made the statement of survival threatening situation. As all of us are aware of who study Japan, that there is an Article 9 in the Japanese Constitution which makes Japan renounces war and was not supposed to have any kind of a military in its territory. However, because of circumstances of, say, the Korean War, etc., Japan did have a self-defense force, and by 2017, you could see that things changed considerably when Japan was positioned itself to be participating in collective security concerns of the world. There are lots of attention given to this collective security concerns, and China is essentially trying to use this as a way of pushing back Japan to accept that Japan would not have any kind of a role to play in any kind of territorial, regional security concerns that would emerge because of China's approach. What is also very important for us to understand is that being the first women prime minister in Japan, she has to solidify her position within her country. Domestically, a concern of this kind can always be reinterpreted as a person who did not have the maturity to handle situations, and especially with China. Let us not forget that initial meeting of Xi Jinping and Takaichi-san had gone off very well, and she had made that, here on things would be different between China and Japan. But however, this particular spate, I personally think, could have been, looked upon differently by China and could have not resulted in the escalation that it has taken. I understand that, if a Chinese diplomat could, in return, talk about cutting the neck of the dirty person in his Twitter, handle and then get it. It was subsequently removed. I think China also has the reasons to have reacted very poorly diplomatically. So effectively, it could have been scaled down. However, I think China is on a bully diplomacy right now with Japan.
All right. Thank you, Professor Chaudhary, for joining us. I wish I had some more time to ask you more questions, but that's all on Japan and China spat for now. Viewers, we have some more news for you. Slovenia is holding a fresh referendum on whether to enforce or suspend a new law allowing assisted dying after critics forced a repeat vote. Parliament approved the law in July following a 2024 referendum that backed it, but a civil group supported by the Catholic Church and conservative opposition gathered 46,000 signatures to challenge it again. The law will take effect unless a majority of voters representing at least 20% of the 1.7 million eligible rejects it. Polls open at 7 a.m. and close 12 hours later, with results expected late Sunday. The law would allow lucid, terminally ill patients to seek assisted dying if suffering is unbearable and all treatments are exhausted. It includes cases of mental illness. Prime Minister Robert Golub is urging support, while opponents accuse the government of trying to poison the ill and elderly. The Catholic Church also rejects the measure, calling it contrary to human dignity. A recent poll shows 54% in favor, 31% against, and 15% undecided. And now moving on, viewers, the former Brazilian President Jair Bolsonaro has been arrested after allegedly trying to open his ankle monitor with a soldering iron in what court documents describe as an escape attempt. Brazil's Supreme Court ordered his detainment early Saturday after Justice Alexandra Moraes said that the device showed burn marks and clear significant malfunction. The 70-year-old sentenced to 27 years in prison for a scheme to stop President-elect Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva from taking office after the 2022 election has been under house arrest since August. Court documents say that Bolsonaro may have planned to flee to a nearby embassy to request asylum, and the Moraes cited a video from his son urging supporters to take to the streets. Bolsonaro was taken to federal police headquarters in Brasilia. His lawyers denied the escape allegations, while supporters claiming political persecution are expected to rally outside. Let's listen in to what his lawyers said.
Olha, essa questão de tornozeleira é uma narrativa que tenta justificar o injustificável. O presidente Bolsonaro não teria de forma alguma como subtrair-se, como evadir-se da sua casa. Ele tem uma viatura armada com agentes federais 24 horas por dia, 7 dias da semana na porta da casa dele.
Well, we are shifting our focus to the International Film Festival being held at Goa in India, where my colleague Uday Pratap Singh got a chance to talk to Jaewon Kim, who's member of South Korean National Assembly. Kim shares her love for Indian music and cinema. Listen in.
Hello and welcome. You're watching our special coverage on NewsX and NewsX World from IFFI 2025 in Goa. Joining us now is member of the Korean National Assembly, Jaewon Kim. Thank you very much for being with us today in Goa.
Thank you. Namaste.
Yes, welcome to India and welcome to Goa. How has your experience been at IFFI 2025? You, of course, were the guest of honor today in the inauguration of the Waves Film Bazaar.
인도의 친절하고 따뜻한 환대에 매우 감사드리고 이번 영화제를 통해서 한국의 영화도 소개하고 그리고 인도와 한국 사이에 문화 교류를 추진하는 것도 매우 의미 있다고 생각을 합니다.
I feel very grateful to be invited and attending this Manipur's film festival and opening ceremony, and along with all other Korean films also. So throughout this is all the chances I would like to take to introduce and promote more mutual relation between the two countries.
Yes. Do you believe this is a soft power, cinema and music between India and Korea?
네, 어떻게 한다고요?
Sorry.
Is it a soft power, which can connect people better, music and cinema between the two countries, India and Korea?
네, 이게 일종의 그런 이제 그 소프트 파워로
네,
연결시켜
soft power.
Yeah,
Yes,
yeah.
yes.
그런 기회에 그렇게 생각을 하시는
예, 그렇죠. 네, 한국에도 부산국제영화제가 있지만 인도 국제영화제는 워낙 오래됐기도 하고요. 네, 거기까지 일단.
Well, as is you have the India Goa Film Festival, so we also is a Busan India
Yes.
International Film Festival. But of course, you guys have a more longer history.
Yes.
문화가 다 서로 다른 문화가 같이 만날 때 새로운 문화를 탄생시킵니다. 인도와 한국은 매우 비슷한 점들이 있고요. 예를 들자면 아까 어른을 위하는 것 같은 거, 그리고 음악 멜로디도 비슷한 면들이 있습니다. 네, 그런 면에서 인도와 한국이 교류하면서 새로운 문화를 탄생시키는데 이번 기회를 통해서 앞장설 수 있다고 생각합니다.
Actually, when two different cultures they encounter each other, then you can create another culture based on the two things. But it's based on not only difference but also the similarity between the two countries. Like it's respecting the elders and the family focused cultures. Based on that, I would like to take chance throughout this invitation and visiting to create that kind of new contents based on the two similarity of the two countries.
Okay. Do you know much about Indian cinema? Who's your favorite actor?
Actor, I don't remember, but I remember these days I watching Delhi Crime.
On Netflix. Yeah.
I love Kurukshetra, the animation.
Okay, as well.
Yes, yes.
Oh, lovely.
Yeah.
So lovely to hear that. Okay, and you sing so well. How long have you been
A
singing
little
for?
bit. Kurukshetra hai. Kurukshetra hai. And I remember also old Hindi movie song.
Yeah.
Tum paas aaye, you muskuraye, tum naine chane kya, sapni tigdaye, ab do mera dil, jage na sataye, kya karu aaye, kuch hota hai. Just like this.
Amazing, amazing.
Thank you.
So amazing. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you so much.
And that's all we have time for. Keep watching NewsX World for more news from across the world.